So today I'll be talking about 10 great rock/metal albums from the year 1992. And this is not a top 10. These are 10 albums that I randomly selected that I feel are great from the year 1992. And honestly, I think 1992 was also overall pretty good year for rock and metal. Probably more rock than metal, but still, I think you got a lot of great releases from that year. And yeah, definitely many albums to choose from for this video, but let's go ahead and dive into this. We're going to go ahead and start off with Alice in Chains with their album Dirt. So you can't really talk about music in 1992 without mentioning grunge or something that's grunge. But yeah, I mean, probably one of the biggest releases from that year. I know it was very commercially successful for the band. Often considered their best, or at least one of their best. I'd say one of their best. Facelift is probably my favorite Alice in Chains album, but this is probably in close second. I mean, really great album, definitely a classic. I mean, the singles on here definitely hold up all these years later. Them Bones, Rooster, Wood, Down in a Hole, so many great songs, and some of the deep cuts on here I think are really good, like Damn That River, Rain When I Die, Junkhead. I mean, all around, really great album from Alice in Chains, and easily one of the band's best. And now I'll be moving to an older band, Def Leppard, with their album Adrenalize. So this album had the tough task of having to follow up their most commercially successful album, and that is Hysteria from 1987. So this is their first album without Steve Clark, and something you'll notice with this album is that it feels a bit darker, and also it's shorter than the last album, Hysteria. You only have 10 tracks here, and honestly, I think this is one of the band's best. I know it at least make my top 5 when it comes to their discography, but many great songs on here. You have the big song on here, Let's Get Rocked, but I think this album has some pretty good singles. Make Love Like a Man, Stand Up, Kick Love Into Motion. That song I think is easily one of the band's best ballads. Kind of underrated a little bit. It's not talked about as much as some of their other ballads, like of course the song Hysteria, but I really like that song a lot. But you have other great songs like I Want to Touch You, which is, I mean, if you're a fan of the more fun side of the band, then you'll enjoy that song. Tonight, another favorite of mine off of here, and also I'd say easily one of their most overlooked, or at least one of their most underrated singles. Not talked about it as much as some of their other singles, like Pour Some Sugar on Me, or Armageddon, or Animal, or anything like that. But yeah, Tonight, definitely a great song. And if you haven't heard this album in a while, definitely give it another listen. And if you're only familiar with their more popular stuff, like stuff from Pyromania or Hysteria, definitely give this album a listen. Definitely check it out. And now we're moving to some progressive metal with Dream Theater, Images and Words, often considered one of their best. And this album and the next album after this one, Awake, those two albums fight for being my favorite Dream Theater album personally. But yeah, this album definitely great and definitely an essential when it comes to progressive metal. I mean, you have their big song on here, Pull Me Under, definitely one of their best songs. Metropolis Part 1, one of the fan favorites off of here, and definitely another highlight off the album. I think the album ends off in a strong note with Learning to Live, which is a contender for maybe being their best album closer, at least in the top 3 when it comes to, again, their album closers. But you also have Take the Time, which was another single off the album, also really good. You have the ballad Another Day, which I'd say is one of their best ballads. But yeah, overall, really great album from Dream Theater. And if you like progressive metal and somehow haven't heard this, definitely give it a listen. And now we're moving to one of the most underrated bands of all time, a band that I highly recommend to all of you, and that is King's X. So yeah, we got King's X with their self-titled album. Now, when people talk about King's X, the albums that are mentioned the most are definitely Gretchen Goes to Nebraska and Dogman. And those albums are great, some of the band's best, but those 2 albums and this album I'd say are their best. And I think this album deserves as much love as those 2 albums that I mentioned. I mean, yeah, I do have the big song on here, Black Flag, but I feel like the rest of the album is somewhat kind of overlooked a little bit, or at least a good chunk of the album. I mean, Some of my favorites on here: The World Around Me, Black Flag, of course, Prisoner, which is probably one of my favorite King's X songs. Absolutely love that song. Kind of an underrated song, I'd say. Same with Not Just for the Dead, another really great song. What I Know About Love, another really good song. I mean, you really can't go wrong with anything off of here. Sure, there are some songs that are stronger or more interesting than some others, but still, definitely one of the band's best, I'd say, in my opinion. If you haven't heard King's X, or if you're not familiar with them, definitely check out this album. I'd say this is not a bad introduction to the band. If you want something a bit older or something 80s, then of course I'd say start off with Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. But yeah, either way, really great album from King's X. Now we're moving to one of the big four from thrash, Megadeth with Countdown to Extinction. I mean, I'd say one of the band's best. It's up there with Peace Sells and Rust in Peace. Rust in Peace probably being my favorite album from Megadeth, and also one of my favorite albums of all time. Definitely one of the best metal albums of all time, I'd say, too. But yeah, it was a big commercial success for the band, especially with the song Symphony of Destruction. But you have other great songs on here like High Speed Dirt, This Was My Life, Ashes in Your Mouth, Skin on My Teeth, Foreclosure of a Dream, which is a bit of a more slower song, also really good. But yeah, really good album from Megadeth. If you're a fan of thrash, definitely check it out. Not as thrashy as their earlier work, or the albums before this, but this was the album that really got them into the mainstream, and I think you still got some pretty good metal out of this. Definitely a really great album. And now I'll be moving to death metal with Obituary, The Incomplete. So yeah, one of the pioneers of the genre, and yeah, definitely a great album. I mean, Cause of Death and World Demise kind of fight for being my favorite Obituary album, but behind those two albums, probably this one. I mean, if I remember correctly, this is their highest selling album. I could be wrong about that, but again, I'm just going based on things that I've heard. But some of my favorites on here, I'm in Pain, which probably one of my favorite Obituary songs. I mean, when I saw Obituary live towards the end of 2021, they did play that song. That definitely had me really pumped because, again, definitely one of my favorites from the band. You also have the title track, which is one of their bigger songs and also really good. You have the song Back to One, which is one of the more faster songs off of here, another favorite of mine off the album. Dead Silence, also pretty good, but yeah, really good album from Obituary. And now we're moving to an album that you kind of have to talk about, especially if you're talking about metal in 1992, and that is Vulgar Display of Power by Pantera. So yeah, a big album for the band. I mean, so many great songs, so many classics. Definitely an essential when it comes to 90s metal. I mean, you have their big song on here, Walk, but you have other really good songs like Mouth for War, which opens up the album in a very great manner. This Love, also really good. Rise, which is one of the maybe one of the heaviest songs on here, but definitely one of the fastest too. Another really great song. But you move towards the second half where you get some pretty overlooked stuff, like again Rise and Live in a Hole by Demons Should Be Driven, which is probably one of the most metal things on the album. I mean, that song is just so awesome. Definitely a song you have to listen to if you're only familiar with the hits. If you somehow haven't heard that song, definitely check it out. But yeah, you really can't go wrong with any of the songs in here. Definitely a really great 90s metal album, and definitely, again, an essential. And probably my favorite Pantera album. I mean, for the longest time, Far Beyond Driven was my favorite, but nowadays, Vulgar is probably my favorite. But let's go ahead and move on to Rage Against the Machine with their self-titled debut. Nowadays, it's kind of tough for me to pick what my favorite Rage Against the Machine album is. For the longest time, Evil Empire was my favorite, but nowadays, I don't really have a favorite. It's kind of tough for me. I mean, there might be days where this might be my favorite, but I could also say the same thing for Battle of Los Angeles or, of course, Evil Empire. But I mean, definitely a really strong debut album for sure. I mean, you have they're one of the biggest songs on here, Killing in the Name. Bullet in the Head, definitely one of their best songs, I'd say. Take the Power Back shows off their more funky side. I really like that song, another favorite of mine from the band. You also have the song Wake Up, which was in the soundtrack of one of the Matrix movies. But yeah, I mean, this album, in my opinion, really has no skips. Really great album, and definitely an essential when it comes to 1992, in my opinion. And Zach De La Rocha, definitely a great frontman. Now let's go ahead and move on to some grunge with Stone Temple Pilots with their debut album, Core. And yeah, this album, almost every fan can at least agree with me that this is definitely one of their best. Some people would point to this as their best. Purple is their best in my opinion, but this would be my second favorite. I mean, you have some of their biggest hits on here. I mean, Wicked Garden is considered for maybe being my favorite Stone Temple Pilots song, but you have other great songs, Dead and Bloated, Sex Type Thing. When it comes to the deeper cuts, I mean, I really like the song Sin. You have another big song on here, Plush, another really great song, still holds up all these years later. Creep is also really good, same with Cracker Man. I mean, all around, really great album from Stone Temple Pilots. And now let's go ahead and move on to the final album for this video, and that is White Zombie with La Sexorcisto. So yeah, this is probably my favorite White Zombie album. I mean, some people might point to Astro Creep as their best or as their favorite, but that album's probably my second favorite, but this one has to be at the top for me. So many great songs. I mean, Thunder Kiss 65, definitely a classic. Same with Black Sunshine. The album opens up in a pretty strong manner with one of the best songs, in my opinion, on the album, Welcome to Planet Motherfucker. Soul Crusher and Spider Baby are some other favorites of mine on the album. I Am Legend is also pretty good. I do like Warp Asylum. I don't know if it's one of my favorites on here, but still, pretty good song. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to Rob Zombie in general, this is definitely one of the best things that he's ever done. And if you're only familiar with his solo work, you definitely got to check out this album. You really got to. If we're talking specific songs, definitely check out Thunder Kiss 65 or Black Sunshine or Soul Crusher or Welcome to Planet Motherfucker. But yeah, this album is definitely awesome and definitely one of the best things to come from 1992, in my opinion, when it comes to the world of rock and metal. So yeah, that's my final album for this video. Those are 10 great rock/metal albums from the year 1992. Let me know your thoughts on these 10 albums here. Let me know of more great albums in the world of rock and metal from 1992 in the comment section below and all the good stuff. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment and a like, subscribe. Have a nice day and take care.